So, I have books today and notes today because every time I tried to think about the Tao, it just disappeared. And finally, I decided what I need to do is just sit in the stillness. And so I did a little Vipassana. I don't know if any of you know what Vipassana is. We think of it as a Buddhist practice, but it's basically sitting in the stillness without moving anything in your body. And, you know, for a lot of people, the itch starts happening, and they basically say, just bring attention to that. But it was quite interesting because I'd been studying the Tao pretty much all week, and this was yesterday afternoon. And I just became extremely still. It was a good hour before, you know, Roy came home and kind of got me back into whatever I was that had a body. But it's been really interesting. So part of what I'd like to do today, and I've kind of put all these papers away here, down here, Philip. I would like to share from actually some of the writings of the Tao, because I think that that's the best way for us to really begin to understand what the Tao is. And I'll give you a little history too. But the first thing I want you to know is from the Tao, from chapter 61. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. So that gets me off the hook right away, right? But that's a basic understanding of what we're dealing with here when we're talking about what is the Tao and what is Taoism. And I got some quotes. I mentioned last week that one of the reasons I wanted to do this series is Matthew Fox's book, One River, Many Wells. And Matthew was my teacher in my doctorate work. And he, of course, he was a Roman Catholic and then became Episcopalian. So a lot of what is in here has a bent on Christianity, but it's Hildegard von Bingen, Julian of Norwich, Meister Eckhart, very early Christian teachings. But what he does in this book is he takes us through the major world religions and shows the basic themes that are in all these religions. The idea being that there's this river of connection that we have, and there are different wells that different cultures go down, different spiritual traditions go down. And so the main ones that he talks about in the book, of course, are Christianity and Buddhism. Next week, Janice is going to talk about Buddhism. Islam, I'm going to be speaking about the mystical aspect of Islam, which is Sufism, on the final Sunday in the month. He talks about Judaism. He brings in some Native American, not a lot of Native American, and he brings some Taoism, but not a lot of Taoism. And it's interesting because the last part of this book, Matthew's talking about the creativity and how that's brought in all these spiritual traditions, beauty, how that's brought in, suffering, how that's brought in. The Tao is not mentioned in any of those chapters because that's not part of the focus of what Taoism is all about, which has been really interesting for me to kind of try to get a handle to talk to you about it. But the more I look at it, I feel like it's giving us a deeper understanding about the practice of stillness and silence and meditation and prayer, which we know are the foundation of unity. When you think about Charles Fillmore, he sat in the silence, and that's how the wonderful revealing word came to him. The words out of the Bible that are the metaphysical dictionary, this all came out of Charles Fillmore sitting in the silence and being in the stillness. So we have that kind of legacy that we receive from some of these ancient traditions, and in this case, it's coming out of China. A little bit more, just a quote here from the Tao. Words that point to the Tao seem monotonous and without flavor. When you look for it, there is nothing to see. When you listen for it, there is nothing to hear. When you use it, it is inexhaustible. My teachings are easy to understand and easy to put into practice, period. Yet, your intellect will never grasp them, and if you try to practice them, you fail. If you want to know me, look inside your heart. If you want to know me, look inside your heart. So this is basically a piece that we got from Meister Eckhart. And I think I've talked about this before. Meister Eckhart says that God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by subtraction. By subtraction. And this is very much a part of what the Taoists are inviting us into. In the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added, they say. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. True mastery can be gained by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering. Such a powerful teaching for us to become aware of, and I think especially in the time that we are living in right now, because we are being bombarded with muchness, suchness, so muchness is coming to us all the time. And for us to be able to really find a place of peace inside ourselves, this practice of releasing and letting go and going into the emptiness is almost, it's like the salvation that we have, to find that place of connection in the heart, connection with the Tao, with the divine presence, with the God life. In a sense, Taoism and the Tao, Tao means way, it's a process. It's not like a religion, it's not like a ritual, it's a process of basically allowing ourselves to be in the emptiness. And we find ways of going there. And it's been interesting for me to look a bit at the history of the Tao. And Roy said, oh, you shouldn't talk about that. They're not going to be interested. But I thought, well, because I was kind of interested, maybe you would be too. Basically, it's coming out of China. And it's coming out of China, and there are three major religions coming out of China. Confucianism coming out of China in the 6th century BC. And out of Confucianism, there were several branches of what Confucianism was all about. And one of them was called Quietism. Confucianism was in China during a time when there was massive war going on. In fact, a lot of the history of China is about war. And Confucianism was all about rigidity, rules, morality. It was very much, very specific. This is what you do. But one of the branches of Confucianism, which was called Quietism, broke away from that and began to look more deeply at what was going in the inner life, not so much about the outer and the rigidity of the rules. And it was out of this branching out of Confucianism that Taoism was born. Also in China, Buddhism came out of China, but a very different kind of awareness. Buddhism talks about emptiness. Maybe some of you have followed some Buddhist practices and you know about mindfulness, you know about emptying the mind. In the sense of Buddhist emptying, it's about letting go of the things that are basically distracting us, letting go of those. In the Tao, they call it the dust. It's the dust. It's just the stuff that's all around. And of course, Buddha talks about all life is dukkha, it's suffering. So there's this kind of awareness of suffering. Taoism doesn't talk about suffering. It's not one of the main things that they're focusing. They're focusing on really essentially happiness and being open and receptive to what is in the actual moment. So I wanted to, I didn't know this felt, I wanted to just talk about a few of the, what you might say, teachings of Taoism. And one of them that's really interesting is they say everything is relative. And I was thinking about that this morning as I was in my car, because the example that's given in this one book that I have, The Way and Its Power, a Study of the Tao Te Ching, Its Place in Chinese Thought, pretty interesting book that my partner Roy had. They talk about the relativity of everything, and they say the tip of the arrow is moving when it's going through space, right? but the tip of the arrow is not moving relative to the shaft of the arrow. And I was thinking about it as I'm driving in my car. I went, okay, I'm looking around, I'm going, okay, so I'm moving relative to the road, relative to San Rafael, Petaluma, Roner Park. I'm moving, but relative to the seat I'm sitting in, I'm not moving. I'm like, all of a sudden my brain kind of scrambled on that one. I'm like, it's just, anyway, that's all I want to say about relativity, because it's just, we think that we know, we have these perceptions, and we think that we know, but it's relative. And it's not just about time and movement of time, you know. So that's one of the tenets of this practice, this process that is known as the Way, or Tao. It came out of China, and there's all sorts of stories about who wrote the Tao. But from what I can really gather in reading, it's basically many different older elders. Lao Tzu, who is said to have written the Tao, actually is a translation of an older wise one. And the Chinese call these people worthies. They were worthies who scribed these sayings, and it might have been that there were many different people who created these sayings, like the first one, those who know do not speak, those who speak who do not know. That could have been kind of a precept and a wise saying that was said by many different people. And it wasn't until about 240 BC that everything got kind of written in and became what is known as the Tao Te Ching, which is the compilation of 88 of these little sayings. And that's basically the main teachings that we have in Taoism. It's these kind of almost Zen-like statements that kind of take us into another place in consciousness. So I'd like to read a couple of these, because I think this is the best way for you to, it was for me the best way for me to kind of begin to hold what it is that they're inviting us into. So page 146. The way is like an empty vessel that yet may be drawn from without ever needing to be filled. It is bottomless, the very progenitor of all things in the world. In it, all sharpness is blunted, all tangles untied, all glare tempered, all dust smoothed. It is like a deep pool that never dries. Was it too the child of something? We cannot tell. But as a substanceless image, it existed before the ancestor. Before the ancestor. So it's this think of being everything and nothing. There's an interesting teaching in the Tao, and it's called the uncarved block. And it's an image of an uncarved block of wood. And what it signifies is the true nature of each one of us. That each one of us are like this uncarved block of wood. That we have within us these certain capacities and certain tendencies. And what we're called to do in our life is be like little children, in the same way Jesus talked about this, is to allow these tendencies that are ours to trust the tendencies, to accept these tendencies, and not to try to be something that we're not, but simply to allow ourselves to explore the uncarved block of wood that each one of us are, that we could become whatever that block of wood could become. It's a very powerful teaching, this idea of just accepting who we are. And if we don't find ourselves able to use the gift in one particular direction. Maybe we use that gift that we've been given in another direction. So I love this idea of the uncarved block of wood and just this sense of being able to adjust ourselves to whatever situation comes. Because this is a big part of what Taoism is all about. And the one teaching that I wanted to kind of spend a little bit more energy on today is the teaching called Wu Wei. It's W-U-W-E-Y. There's actually a book, and maybe some of you read this years ago. It's called The Tao of Pooh. And it's all about Pooh Bear and how the Wu Wei is the way of Pooh, in a way. Just how Pooh shows up in all of these situations of just being very present to whatever is there. That's kind of Pooh's way of being, having a certain kind of sensitivity to circumstances, that you're just present, you're not chasing, you're not rabbit, you're not running around, you're not owl who knows everything, that sort of full mind you're not Tigger. And what's Tigger's like, bouncing all over the place? Tigger can do anything, right? There's just these qualities that Pooh had of just being present to what is, I love this little story. There's a little story, it's in the Tao of Pooh, but in Pooh too. So it was Eeyore's birthday, and Pooh Bear, people know who Winnie the Pooh is, right? You guys know Winnie the Pooh. So Pooh and Rabbit are going to get presents for Eeyore. Rabbit decides he's going to get a balloon. He's got this balloon, and so he's rushing off to go to Eeyore's house with his balloon. Well, Pooh decided that he was going to give Eeyore a big jar of honey. And Pooh sets out, as Pooh's wandering along, he's getting hungry. And what does a bear do when he's hungry? He's got his honey. So he starts eating the honey, and he's sitting, and it's awfully good. So he keeps eating, and eventually he ends up with an empty jar. But as he's heading along to Eeyore's, to the party, he notices one of his friends is able to do some writing on the jar, so he takes the jar over to his friend, and he has the friend write, "Happy birthday, Eeyore," on the jar. Anyway, both Rabbit, who's in such a hurry, he trips and falls and squashes the balloon. So by the time he gets to Eeyore's house, Rabbit has like a string with this dead balloon on it. And Pooh has his pot, his honey pot, that happens to be empty, but it has a nice little sign for Eeyore on it. So they arrive at Eeyore's house, wishing him happy birthday. And of course, Rabbit is like, "Well, I had this balloon for you, but I was in such a hurry and I tripped and fell, but here you go, Eeyore." And he gives him the balloon, this sort of saggy. And Pooh is overjoyed because he said, "And Eeyore, I have a pot that you can put the balloon in." This is the essence of Wu Wei. This is the essence of just being in the flow. And that's what Wu Wei is all about. If we would think of it in three kind of terms, it's actionless action, actionless action. What they say about Wu Wei is people think it's woo-woo because they think it means we don't do anything. You're just going to sit on your cushion and do nothing. But it doesn't mean that. It means that whatever we're going to do, we give it our undivided attention. And that's what Pooh was doing, right? He was going, but he got hungry. And, he had the honey, so what do? When you're hungry, you eat the honey. But each step along the way, you give your undivided attention. And if it turns out that you don't know what to do, what do? You stop. You pause, you wait until you're in that space of emptiness. What needs to be done emerges for you. This is the Wu Wei way, the Wu Wei way, not the Wu Wu way. And basically, if you think about it as three things, think about it that Wu Wei is like we flow like water. And what does water do? I had an image, and it was a waterfall with big rocks. water will flow to the lowest point and it will just go around obstacles. But water will also wear away the heaviest rock. So this idea of the Wu Wei is about flowing like water. We flow like water, and we reflect like a mirror. And what could that mean for us, to reflect like a mirror? We accept what is right in front of us. What is there? That's that sense of reflecting like a mirror, being present in the moment to exactly what's there. We flow like water. We take that low ground energy and just flow like water. We're not trying to leap over. We're not trying to be on top. And we reflect like the mirror of what is right in front of us in the moment. And we respond like an echo. What is an echo? It's something that we have already heard, that we hear again. And it's about being in that stillness and revealing what it is that is ours to do. That's the Wu Wei, the no action of the Wu Wei. To flow like water, to reflect like a mirror, and to respond like an echo. Such a powerful, powerful teaching. It's to do without doing. So I'd like to share a couple of verses with you. One of the things that people know who Bruce Lee was. Bruce Lee had a saying about becoming water. He said, "Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. Now you put the water into a cup, and it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put water into a teapot, and it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Be water." Think about the movement of Tai Chi and Qigong. This is that part of Taoism is a practice they call inner alchemy, which is very esoteric, and I'm not getting into it, but there's a lot of wisdom that was brought from the Hindu tradition about the physical body, the dhyana meditation in Hinduism, and what we did last week, which was a dhyana on that yantra, on that mandala, that comes out of Hinduism, which is much older than Taoism. But in the Tao practices, and especially in the esoteric practices of the alchemy, where they're really working with the physical body, they're using a lot of the practices from the ancient Hindu yogi, from the rishis in the mountains, and from the practices of breath. In fact, part of the practices for longevity, which was a big practice for these Taoist masters. Some of them are said to have lived over 200 years. But they used a practice where they would take in the breath with the nose and hold the breath for 120 counts, holding that breath, and then slowly exhale. And they said they would exhale through the mouth. What would happen is less air would come out. It would alchemicalize the physical body by doing these meditation practices. So I didn't get into a lot of that, but there's so many deep layers to Taoism. And I don't know about you, but I don't personally know anybody who's a Taoist. I know there was a group in Berkeley, because we had them once come speak at my church. But for me, the whole practice of the emptiness and the Wu Wei, this flow and mirror and responding like an echo, is a powerful thing for us to become aware of. What I'd like to do as a meditation is read one of the Tao, one of the chapters from the Tao Te Ching, one of the 88 chapters of the Tao Te Ching. And so while I'm reading it, Guy, you could play, and then when we stop, I want to just have silence. I want us to just allow ourselves to be in that place of silence. Yes, you can turn that off. So get yourself settled in your body. And taking in a deep and a conscious breath and letting it out as comfortably. And another deep breath. This is chapter 11 from the Tao Te Ching. We put 30 spokes together and we call it a wheel. But it is on the space where there is nothing that the usefulness of the wheel depends. We turn clay to make a vessel, but it is on the space where there is nothing that the usefulness of the vessel depends. We pierce doors and windows to make a house, and it is on these spaces where there is nothing that the usefulness of the house depends. Therefore, just as we take advantage of what is, we should recognize the usefulness of what is not. So I invite you to take this into a meditation right now. Finding the emptiness as you breathe more deeply and allow the silence to find a place in your heart. I'm feeling gratitude for this awareness of the teachings of the Tao and the Wu Wei teaching of doing without doing, actionless action. Let us take this out into our days and weeks, that we may be like a stream that flows like water, one who reflects like a mirror and responds like an echo. And gently taking a deep and a conscious breath, offering gratitude for these ancient wisdom teachings, for the gift and grace of this time together. And gently, as you're ready, relaxing into the body, you could gently open your eyes.